Zayden Nolan didn't expect to carry a stranger in his arms down a muddy hiking trail, while his 6-year-old son watched wide-eyed, but here he was, soaked in sweat, his arms wrapped around a woman who looked like she belonged in a Vogue magazine rather than the middle of nowhere. "I told you I could make it," the woman grumbled, her ankle visibly swollen, her pride more bruised than her leg. Zayden glanced down at her, adjusting his grip. "Yes, and I told you I wasn't going to leave you to crawl the last mile." She huffed and crossed her arms as best she could while being carried bridal style. "You're stubborn." "So are you," he shot back, biting back a grin. "Lucky for you, I've had practice carrying bags of cement and a kid who thinks he's Spider-Man." "Daddy, is she okay?" little Oliver asked, trotting beside him with his Spider-Man backpack bouncing at his sides. "She'll be fine, buddy," Zayden said, nodding toward the parking lot finally visible through the trees. "We're almost there." The woman, Celia Monroe, though he didn't know that yet, winced as another jolt of pain hit her ankle. She twisted it pretty bad coming down the trail, and Zayden happened to be the only one nearby when she cried out. He hadn't hesitated, just scooped her up and told Oliver to grab her bag. They reached the lot, and Zayden gently set her down on the bench near the trailhead. She looked at him, her eyes a sharp, captivating hazel that made him pause mid-motion. "Thanks," she said, her voice softer now. "Less fight, more vulnerability. You didn't have to do that." Zayden crouched in front of her, checking the ankle. "You're lucky it's not broken," he murmured. "It's gonna swell like crazy, though. You need ice." "I'll call a car," she said, reaching for her phone. "No signal up here," he replied, nodding at his truck parked a few feet away. "I'll take you down to town. There's a clinic near the diner." "I don't want to inconvenience you." "You're not," he cut her off. "Besides, Ollie's hungry. We were headed there anyway. Right, buddy?" "Do they have pancakes?" Oliver asked, hopeful. "The best," Zayden chuckled. "Come on." Celia hesitated, but the pain made the decision for her. She let him help her up again, biting back a wince as he guided her to the passenger seat of his beat-up truck. Inside, it smelled faintly of sawdust and something lemony. "You a carpenter or something?" she asked as he started the engine. "Contractor, mostly renovations. Small stuff these days," he said, his tone casual but tired. "Work's been slow." Oliver piped up from the back. "Daddy builds houses, and he makes the best grilled cheese in the world." Zayden glanced at Celia. "My toughest client," he joked, nodding at his son in the mirror. She smiled, genuinely this time. It softened the sharpness in her features. "Sounds like you've got your hands full." "Yeah, well, it's just me and him," Zayden said. "His mom left a few years ago. Guess solo parenting wasn't her thing." "I'm sorry," Celia said quietly. He shrugged. "We're doing all right. Some days are harder than others." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was thick with something unspoken. Something that made Celia look at him again, really look. He wasn't polished. His shirt was 2 buttons undone, his hands calloused, his jaw shadowed with stubble. But there was something in the way he focused completely on his son, and how he didn't once try to impress her. He was just being himself. When they pulled into the small-town diner, Zayden parked and moved quickly to her side, offering his arm to help her inside. Oliver skipped ahead, already announcing, "3 pancakes, please." "Guess I've been outvoted," Celia muttered. Zayden laughed as he helped her into a booth. "You don't seem like the pancake type." "What's that supposed to mean?" she said with playful fire. "You're wearing heels in the woods," he said, raising an eyebrow. She looked down at her expensive, now ruined Louboutins and sighed. "I needed air. I've had a day." "Bad day, huh?" "Week," she corrected, glancing out the window. "I run a company. Sometimes it runs me." Zayden blinked. "You're a CEO." She didn't answer immediately. "Let's just say, I make a lot of decisions." He didn't press. Instead, he flagged down the waitress and ordered for all three of them. Celia watched him as he talked to the server, kind, respectful, confident, nothing flashy but solid, reliable. And something about the way Oliver clung to him, completely trusting, made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. "So," she said once the food arrived, "you always carry women out of the woods, or am I special?" He looked at her, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Only the ones who twist their ankles and insult my truck." She laughed, actually laughed, and even Oliver joined in. By the end of breakfast, Zayden had offered to drive her home. She hesitated. "I live in the city," she said. "That's 2 hours away," he said, surprised. "What were you doing out here?" "Hiking off stress," she said. "Didn't expect to blow out my ankle." "I'll take you," he said without a second thought. "Oliver can nap in the back. I've got nowhere else to be today." She studied him like she couldn't quite figure him out. "You don't even know me." Zayden stood, tossing some bills onto the table. "I don't leave people stranded, even ones wearing $1,000 shoes." He didn't notice the way her eyes widened slightly. How did he know the price? By the time he dropped her off in front of her glass, high-rise downtown, reality hit harder than she expected. "Thanks," she said again, this time quieter. He nodded. "Take care of that ankle, and maybe next time, sneakers." She opened her mouth to say something else, but he was already helping Oliver into the truck again. As he pulled away, she stood there on the sidewalk, watching until his taillights disappeared. Celia Monroe had just been carried down a mountain by a man who had no idea. She was CEO of one of the biggest luxury brands in the country. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't want him to find out. Not yet, not until she saw him again. Which, she realized with a jolt, she very much wanted to. Celia leaned against the cool glass of her office window, staring out at the skyline but seeing none of it. She'd been back in the city for 3 days, and still, that man Zayden lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't turn off. The way he hadn't flinched at her attitude, how he'd carried her like it was nothing, the quiet steadiness in his voice, it played on repeat in her mind. A knock on her door pulled her back to the present. "Ms. Monroe, you're due in 20, her assistant said, poking her head in. "Right," Celia said, straightening. "Bring the mock-ups to the boardroom, and call Anton, tell him to move the Milan call to tomorrow." She limped slightly as she crossed the office, heels abandoned in favor of flats. Her ankle still ached, but that wasn't what was bothering her. She was used to being in control. Here, she was the final word. But for the first time in years, someone had seen her in a completely unguarded moment and hadn't treated her any differently. Zayden didn't know her title or her brand. He'd just seen a woman who needed help and acted. The board meeting passed in a blur. Numbers, projections, marketing angles, none of it anchored her the way it usually did. Afterward, as the room cleared, her CFO lingered. "Everything all right?" he asked. "You've been distracted." "I'm fine," she said too quickly. "Just tired." He nodded, unconvinced, and left. That night, she sat in her apartment with a glass of wine untouched beside her. She stared at her phone, scrolling through her recent calls, debating. She didn't have his number, and he didn't have hers. All she knew was that his name was Zayden, and he had a son named Oliver. And that he'd looked at her like she was just a person, not a brand or a headline. She opened her laptop and typed cautiously. "Zayden contractor, single dad, Oliver." The search yielded nothing at first. A few irrelevant names. A plumbing service 3 states away. But then an image. A listing for a small renovation company in a town just outside the state line. The website was simple. No contact form, just a phone number and a few photos of wooden staircases and kitchen remodels. He hadn't mentioned a business name that day. But the picture on the About page showed Zayden with a toolbox and Oliver in a hard hat that was clearly too big for him. her heart squeezed. She closed the laptop. She shouldn't, she barely knew him, but something in her refused to let it go. The next afternoon, she stepped out of a sleek black car onto the sidewalk of a small town street she'd never seen before. Her driver looked unsure. "Are you certain this is where you'd like to be dropped, Ms. Monroe?" "I'll call when I'm ready to be picked up," she said, adjusting the cuff of her coat. She found the shop easily. The front door jingled when she stepped inside. A young woman behind the counter looked up from a clipboard. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Zayden Nolan." The woman nodded toward the back. "He's in the workshop, hang on." A few moments later, Zayden appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped in his tracks when he saw her. "Celia." She'd worn jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back. Nothing about her screamed CEO. "Hi," she said, managing a small smile. "Hope it's okay I came by." He blinked. "Yeah, I just wasn't expecting to see you." "I wasn't expecting to be here either," she admitted, "but I wanted to thank you, properly." "I told you, it wasn't a big deal." "It was to me." He leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "Your ankle better." "Getting there," she hesitated. "I've been thinking about that day, about you." Zayden raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because it's rare for someone to help without asking for anything, especially someone who doesn't know who I am." "I didn't need to know," he said simply. She stepped closer. "That's exactly why it came." He looked down at the rag in his hands, then back at her. "You drove all the way out here for that." "I needed to see if it was real," she said. "That day felt different." Zayden studied her for a long moment. "You hungry?" She blinked. "What?" "There's a diner down the block. Better burgers than pancakes." Celia smiled, surprised. "Sure." As they walked, he glanced over. "So, you gonna tell me who you actually are?" She stiffened slightly. "Does it matter?" He didn't answer immediately. "Only if it changes the way you talk to me." They reached the diner and slipped into a booth near the back. The waitress greeted him by name, and he ordered for them both without looking at a menu. Celia watched him, fascinated. "Everyone here knows you." "Small town, hard to stay anonymous." "Must be nice," she said, stirring her water. "Being seen without being examined." Zayden tilted his head. "You don't get that much." "Not since I was 22. He didn't press. Instead, he shifted in his seat. "Oliver's with my sister today. She picks him up from school sometimes when I've got projects running late." She smiled at the mention. "He's adorable." "Yeah," Zayden said, a warmth in his voice that couldn't be faked. "He's the best part of my life." Their food arrived, and conversation turned casual but not shallow. They talked about music, the weirdest things they'd eaten, the worst jobs they'd had. Celia confessed she'd once worked in a bookstore and got fired for reading too much on the clock. Zayden admitted he used to hate group projects in school because he didn't trust anyone to do the work right. They were halfway through their meals when he leaned back. "You still haven't told me what you do." She hesitated. "I run a company." He waited, his expression unreadable. "I built a luxury fashion brand," she said finally. "It started small, now it's not." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Well," Zayden said, "that explains the shoes." She laughed, startled. "That obvious, huh?" "You wear your confidence like armor," he said, matter of fact. "But that day, you didn't have it, and you still held your own." Celia looked down, caught off guard by the honesty. "Most people don't see past the surface." "I do," he said, "always have." She looked up, eyes meeting his. Something shifted in the air between them, thick with something unspoken, but undeniable. Outside, the sky was starting to dim. Inside, Everything felt like it had just begun. Zayden stood at the edge of the community center gymnasium, arms folded, watching Oliver dart between cones in his soccer class. The other parents clustered near the bleachers, sipping coffee and chatting, but he kept to himself. After years of doing this alone, he knew how to blend into the background. A voice behind him broke through his focus. "I didn't expect to see tiny cleats in your world." He turned, startled, and found Celia standing there in a navy trench coat, her hair swept up, and a sharp gleam in her eyes that hadn't dulled since he last saw her. She held a small paper bag in one hand and gave him a look like she'd walked into a meeting she intended to win. Zayden blinked. "What are you doing here?" "I asked around," she said, stepping beside him. "Your receptionist mentioned you'd be here today. Brought lunch." She handed him the bag, and he opened it to find a meatball sub wrapped in foil and a small thermos of black coffee. "I figured you don't take breaks," she added, "and I owe you at least this." He closed the bag slowly, unsure. "You really didn't have to come all the way here." Celia didn't step back. "I wanted to." They stood in silence a moment as Oliver kicked the ball into a tiny net with exaggerated enthusiasm. "He's getting better," she said. Zayden nodded, still cautious. "He likes it, gives him something to look forward to." She glanced sideways. "You always this guarded." He didn't look at her. "You always this persistent." "I don't like leaving things unfinished," she said, "especially when they feel important." Zayden finally turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "Important how?" Celia took a breath, her voice quieter now. "I'm used to people wanting something from me. You didn't. That stayed with me." "You were hurt," he replied. "I helped, that's all." "No," she said, "it wasn't all." Zayden shifted his weight, still not sure what to make of the woman who looked like she could buy the entire town, but stood beside him like she had nothing to prove. "You know," he said, "this town's not really built for people like you." "I'm not here for the town," she replied. He considered that, and what exactly are you here for? "You." He didn't speak, but the air changed around them. She wasn't trying to impress him, her tone was steady, her expression unreadable. "I'm not sure what you think this is," Zayden finally said, "but my life isn't simple." "I didn't ask for simple." He looked down at the bag in his hands. "You really think you can just drop into someone's life with a sandwich and a smile and fix things?" "I don't want to fix you," Celia said. "I just want to know you." Zayden was about to respond when Oliver ran up, flushed and panting. "Dad, did you see that goal?" Zayden crouched, ruffling his son's hair. "I did, looked like a pro." Oliver noticed Celia then and brightened. "You came back." Celia smiled. "I told you I might." "Are you staying for ice cream?" he asked, bouncing slightly. Zayden started to decline, but Celia knelt to Oliver's level. "That depends. Do you think your dad would let me?" Oliver looked up at his father, hopeful. Zayden sighed, then stood. "All right, but it's your bedtime soon." Oliver cheered and ran back toward the cones. As they walked to the corner ice cream shop, Celia matched Zayden's stride without speaking. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Inside, Oliver pressed his face against the glass display while the teenage clerk waited. "Mint chip," he announced. Zayden ordered black cherry, and Celia surprised them both by choosing bubblegum. Zayden raised an eyebrow. "Didn't peg you for the bubblegum type." She licked her cone and shrugged. "You don't know everything yet." They took their cones to a picnic table outside. Oliver sat between them, swinging his legs and humming to himself. "I've been thinking about doing something different," Celia said after a while. "Something that doesn't involve boardrooms or stock tickers." Zayden looked at her. "Like what?" "I'm not sure yet," she said. But lately I've been wondering what it'd be like to build something that isn't for everyone else. Something personal. He watched her carefully. You thinking of moving out here? I'm thinking of seeing where this goes. Whatever this is, she said, nodding between them. Zayden leaned back, his mouth tightening a fraction. I've got a kid. A business that barely breaks even. No time, no money, no backup plan. I've got all of those, she said, but none of them have made me feel like myself the way you did. That day on the trail, I didn't just twist my ankle. I crashed into something didn't know I needed. Zayden exhaled, eyes fixed on the horizon. You're not used to hearing no, are you? I'm not used to people being worth the risk, she replied. They sat in silence, the sounds of children laughing nearby and the distant buzz of a plane overhead filling the space between them. Oliver leaned against his father's side, already sleepy. Dad. Yes, buddy. Can she come again next time? Zayden met Celia's eyes. She didn't smile, she just waited. He brushed a hand over Oliver's head. If she wants to. I do, she said quietly. Zayden nodded once, then helped Oliver up. Come on, we've got homework to look at. Celia walked with them back toward the parking lot. As they reached her car, she paused. I don't know where this leads, she said, but I haven't felt this awake in years. Zayden held the door open for Oliver, then turned to her. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises, she said, just a chance. He studied her for a long moment, then opened the driver's side door. I'll call you, he said. You don't have my number. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the folded paper from her lunch bag. You wrote it on the napkin, he said. Celia blinked. You noticed that? I notice more than you think. She stepped back, letting him close the door. As the truck pulled away, she exhaled slowly, the city behind her, the road ahead uncertain. But for the first time in her carefully constructed life, she didn't feel lost, just daring. Zayden leaned back against the tailgate of his truck, arms folded across his chest, watching as Oliver spun in circles in the empty lot behind the workshop, pretending the stick in his hand was a lightsaber. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze across the cracked pavement, and the scent of cut wood drifted from the open garage behind him. The phone in his back pocket buzzed once, and he already knew it was her. He didn't reach for it immediately. The last few weeks had been a slow unraveling of everything he thought he understood. Celia had returned to the town 4 times, once to help paint a mural at Oliver's school, once to deliver a custom bookshelf she had commissioned from a local craftsman for his office, and twice with no plan at all just to see him. Each time, she'd left behind a ripple neither of them could ignore. He finally checked the screen. Her name glowed back at him. He answered. You free tonight? She asked, her tone quieter than usual. He looked at Oliver, still twirling. Depends. I want to show you something, she said, both of you. Zayden hesitated. We don't do well with fancy. It's not fancy, she said. It's just different. He didn't answer right away, but Oliver had already stopped spinning and was now watching him, hopeful. What time? Celia wasn't waiting at the curb when they arrived. Instead, Zayden pulled up to a small building tucked between 2 modern towers on the quieter side of the city. There was no sign, only a single brass light above the door and a row of ivy climbing up the brick wall. She stepped out when she heard the truck idle, wearing dark jeans and a loose white shirt, her hair pulled into a low twist. No heels, no makeup, just her. Zayden helped Oliver out of the truck, and they followed her through the unmarked door. Inside was a space that didn't belong to any one world. Exposed beams, worn leather chairs, shelves lined with tools and fabric swatches, and in the center a work table covered in sketches, bolts of fabric, and partially assembled clothing. I bought this place 10 years ago, she said. Back when I thought I'd design everything I wore, it was supposed to be my escape, but I forgot about it, until now. Oliver wandered to the work table, fascinated by the spools of thread. Zayden walked slowly, his eyes catching on the combination of industry and comfort. Nothing about it screamed money, but everything whispered intention. I want to turn it into something real, she said. Not for press, not for the brand, just something that makes things for people who actually need them. Zayden raised an eyebrow. You're going to make clothes by hand? No, she said. I'm going to hire people with skills and no platform. I'll fund it, but they'll run it. It'll be theirs. I just needed to remember why I started all this in the first place. He stepped closer to the table, picking up a sketch of a jacket with reinforced stitching along the shoulders. This one's sharp. My brother used to wear something like that before he deployed, she said. I designed it the week he left. Zayden set it down gently. You never mentioned him. She shrugged one shoulder. He didn't come back. Her voice didn't break. It bent but didn't shatter. Zayden didn't reach for her. He didn't say sorry. He just stood still, the silence between them respectful. Oliver tugged on her sleeve. Can I draw something? Celia smiled and handed him a pencil. Of course. While Oliver scribbled, Zayden moved to the windows, looking out at the city beyond. So, what happens now? Celia leaned against the table beside him. Now, stop pretending, don't care where this is going. He turned to her, and where is it going? I don't know, she said, but I want it to include you. Zayden didn't answer right away. He watched Oliver, focused and carefree, and then looked back at her. You sure you're ready for this? I'm not sure of anything, she said, except that every time I leave you, I want to come back. He let the weight of that settle. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. Celia exhaled, something easing in her shoulders. Later that evening, she didn't send them back to the truck. Instead, she led them up the narrow staircase above the workshop to a small rooftop patio. The skyline shimmered in the distance, but the space itself was quiet, private. A single table was set with 3 mismatched chairs and a simple dinner: roasted chicken, vegetables, and bread. I cooked it, she said, almost defensively. Zayden eyed the setup. You cook. Badly, she admitted, but followed a recipe. Oliver sat eagerly, already reaching for the bread. They ate under string lights strung along the railing, the hum of the city a gentle pulse beneath them. Zayden didn't speak much, but when he did, it was with a softness Celia hadn't seen before, not hesitant, something deeper. Trust, maybe. After Oliver fell asleep in one of the chairs, curled beneath a blanket Celia had tucked beside the table, Zayden stayed behind while she carried dishes inside. When she returned, he was still there, watching the city. You know, he said, not turning, I haven't let anyone in since she left. Celia walked to his side. I'm not asking you to forget her, or pretend she didn't matter. Zayden looked at her then, but you matter too. Her breath caught. I don't have all the right words, he added, but I know what this feels like, and I don't want to walk away from it. She stepped forward, closing the distance, and reached for his hand again, the same one that had carried her down a trail weeks ago without hesitation. You won't have to, she said. He bent his head, resting his forehead gently against hers. No grand declarations, just the quiet certainty of 2 people who had spent too long building walls and were now finally ready to dismantle them together. That weekend, she returned to the town with a suitcase, not to visit, to stay. She rented a small house near the school, enrolled Oliver in the after-school art program she'd anonymously funded, and began hiring for her new studio. Not one headline mentioned it. No press releases. No cameras. Zayden built her a new workbench by hand. She designed him a jacket for the winter. Oliver helped paint the front door bright blue. And slowly, without flash or fanfare, they became a family. Not because they planned it, but because they chose each other, again and again, in every ordinary moment that followed. Zayden stood in front of the long mirror bolted to the wall of Celia's newly reopened studio, adjusting the cuffs of the navy button-down she had chosen for him. He didn't usually wear anything that needed ironing, but tonight wasn't a usual night. The grand opening of the studio's first community collection was happening in less than an hour, and the space buzzed with last-minute preparations. The soft hum of sewing machines had been replaced by the clinking of glasses and the shuffle of heels on pas. Celia passed behind him, fastening a delicate silver clasp at the back of her neck. He caught her reflection in the mirror. Her dress was understated soft charcoal with a structured neckline, but it suited her in a way that made Zayden pause. She met his eyes in the mirror, the edge of her mouth lifting. "You clean up better than I expected," she said. He turned. "That sounds dangerously close to a compliment." She tilted her head. "Take it while it lasts. I'm officially in pre-event chaos mode." He nodded toward the door. "You sure you want to do this without the press?" "I want to do this without control," she said, her voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "No press, no lights, no forced smiles, just the people who made it happen." He leaned against the doorway as she gathered a stack of hand-printed programs from a table. "You're different when you're here." "I'm real when I'm here," she said, glancing up. "It's strange. Haven't felt this grounded since I was 19. Before the brand became everything," she said. "I used to care more about the people than the perception. I lost that somewhere along the way." He crossed the room and gently took the stack from her hands. "Then, I guess it's a good thing you found it again." She looked up at him, her expression shifting. "I wouldn't have without you." Before he could say anything, Oliver burst through the door in a button-up shirt slightly wrinkled from the car ride, and a pair of two big dress shoes he'd insisted on wearing. "Miss Celia," he called, holding up a folded piece of paper. "I drew a new logo idea. It's a bear with wings." Celia reached for it with a delighted laugh. "That's genius." "Dad said bears can't fly, but I said maybe they can if they believe it." Zayden raised a brow. "Sounds like something your aunt told you." Oliver grinned. "She said anything's possible if you have snacks." Zayden chuckled as Celia crouched beside Oliver, smoothing his collar and brushing something off his sleeve. "You look sharp, kiddo." "I feel itchy," he whispered. She kissed the top of his head. "Then you'll fit right in." The event began as twilight settled, casting a warm glow through the wide windows. Inside, soft music played while guests wandered among installations showcasing the work of local designers, each piece hand-stitched, hand-dyed, and inspired by real people in the town. A jacket modeled after a retired firefighter's uniform. A dress sewn with fabric from a grandmother's quilt. Stories were attached to every hanger. Zayden stood near the back, watching Celia move through the crowd, offering sincere praise and listening more than speaking. She didn't lead the room, she belonged to it. And for a man who'd spent most of his life building things with his hands, he now realized he was standing next to someone who was rebuilding her world from the inside out. A woman approached him with a glass of sparkling cider and nodded toward Celia. "She really is something, huh?" Zayden accepted the drink. "Yeah, she is. She told me you're the one who convinced her to open the place again." "I didn't convince her," he said. "I just didn't get in her way." Celia returned to his side a moment later, tucking her arm through his. "I've been looking for you." He nodded toward the stage. "Looks like it's time for your speech." "I'm not giving one," she said. "You're not." "I've said enough in my life," she replied. "Tonight the work speaks for itself." They stood together as guests applauded the makers, and the models, none of whom had ever walked a runway before. There were no photographers, no velvet ropes. Just people proud of what they'd made, proud of who they were becoming. Later, as the space emptied and the last lights dimmed, Celia led Zayden and Oliver up to the rooftop. The string lights were still in place from the dinner weeks ago, but now they glowed against a backdrop of stars. "I got you something," she said, reaching into a small box beside the door. Zayden raised an eyebrow. "You already gave me the shirt." "This is different." She handed him a leather-bound portfolio. Inside were architectural sketches, some hers, some clearly Oliver's, complete with dragons and trapdoors. "These are yours," she said. "The new studio has a space in the back. I thought you could use it for your own projects, renovating homes, building furniture, whatever you want." He looked at her, the weight of the gesture anchoring something deep inside. "You're giving me part of your studio." "No," she said. "I'm asking you to share it with me." He closed the portfolio, his voice low. "You sure about that?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Oliver curled up in one of the patio chairs, already drifting off, and Zayden pulled Celia into his arms, their foreheads touching in the quiet. "You changed everything," he said. "So did you." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need promises because everything had already been decided. They had chosen each other in the quiet, in the chaos, in the rebuilding. Months passed. The studio grew, Zayden's workshop filled with commissions. Celia continued to create, but now with others beside her. The town rallied around the venture not as a novelty, but as something that belonged. They bought a house with a wraparound porch and a crooked fence Oliver insisted on painting neon green. On weekends, they walked to the farmer's market, fingers interlaced, arguing over who made better waffles. One evening, as the sun set behind their home and the air buzzed with summer crickets, Zayden handed Celia a small box without ceremony. Inside was a ring simple, understated, a brushed gold band with a tiny sapphire at the center. "He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. I want this, you, us, everything, forever." She closed the box, tears catching in her throat. "You're dangerously good at timing." "I've been building up to it." They married in the backyard that fall. No press, no designers, just laughter, wildflowers, and Oliver reciting a poem he wrote himself, which ended halfway through because he forgot the rest and just said, "I love you both. A lot." It was perfect. And every day after that, they built something new, together.